Good morning. Good morning. This is Biniam on the Checkin In podcast. Welcome to today's episode. Today is September the 27th, 2021. It's a Monday again. I'm hoping you all had a fantastic weekend. Good to be back on the podcast after some time. Enjoying the weekend. Good morning, my dear friend Ollie. Good to see you again there. You're always a regular, and I appreciate you being here. Today is episode 61. We are progressing onward in our accumulation. Good morning, Taylor. Thank you so much for the well wishes. Been checking the podcast. We are here for three distinct reasons, three things that I continue to hone in on and focus as I go through these podcasts. Number one, it's growing self-awareness, and getting to know myself a lot better by asking these self-reflection questions and benefiting from that process of becoming more aware of me. Secondly, it's to grow in kindness towards myself. Kindness because we all could use a little bit of kindness, but especially towards ourselves. Especially towards ourselves because that is one of the challenges that we continually experience in this lifetime is the self-critique that we learn from external factors, and then we sort of like try to make ourselves fit in ways that sometimes we don't. And it's really important to note how in our humanity it's a good thing to be able to be okay that we are just human. To be human is not to be perfect. It's to be messy. It's to try and learn our way forward. And so that's another important component is the kindness piece that we show ourselves. And then finally, of course, it's pursuing our happiness. And let me tell you, I'm a serious connoisseur of happiness. I really appreciate those experiences of happiness that I cultivate and relish and thrive off of. And so I think that's an important component that I want to make more and more certain in my sphere. So today, our question that we are answering on the Bin Checking podcast is, what's your favorite self-care activity? What's your favorite self-care activity and why do you enjoy it so much? I invite you to this process of growing and learning about ourselves as we do together. I'm modeling how I do it. Usually start off the podcast by considering the question and asking some questions or analyzing some of the components of the question. This is one of those questions that gets us focusing on our well being. When's the last time you intentionally took time out to attend to your well being? Seeing how you're doing. It's kind of like, if you will, checking the oil in your engine, right? We don't often do that. We all often put gas in our tanks because that's what we need and that's what goes out. However, what do we do on an ongoing basis to check in on ourselves and see how we're doing? I think this is one of the neglected components of our existence. It's really helpful and handy to keep in mind of where we're going, how we're going to get there, but how we're also going to get our frame there in a really good space. Some individuals in our lifetime have made some significant accomplishments in their existence. They either have built fantastic companies or made some amazing products or brought some new insight and keen intuition into our awareness as human beings. But I wonder how many of those individuals were able to attend to their well being along the way. There are some significant sacrifices that we make to accomplish anything in life, isn't there? Are there? But in the process of accomplishing these amazing feats, sometimes we are a little worse to tear. Consider some of the sports heroes that you might have who executed so well, but now their body doesn't quite work as well as it once used to, right? Consider those who perhaps have pushed themselves intellectually. Now they're probably aware that this sacrifice involved those personal relationships that were closest to them. For example, Dylan, that's right, yeah, is asking why I got a divorce. That's part of that answer for me is how did I not care for myself and able to tend to my marriage and why I'm now separated from my ex, my amazing ex who I speak the world of because she is just that kind of an individual. What was it that I missed along the way to not attend to and make sure that our well-being was good. My well-being was good, so I could actually do that. And at the very heart of it, Dylan, I would say short answer is lack of honesty, lack of awareness in how to communicate forthrightly and transparently with this person who was very close to me. That was at the very heart of it. The simpler answer that most people would just say is, "Hey, Biniam, we just cheated, and that's it." I would say, yeah, that's the expression of the underlying root of the problem. And that root of the problem, I would dig down even further and say that was for me not being honest or transparent. And so that's an expression there that I was in this sphere of where I wasn't attending to my well being. So it's a really important question for us to ask and consider this question today. What's your favorite self care activity and why do you enjoy it so much? The thing that just jumps out for me at the very beginning is self care. My goodness, for the longest time, dear friends, I was unaware about what self care looked like for me because as a functional codependent for such a long time, I was a lot more aware of what everyone else's expectations for me were. I was a lot more aware of how I was going to fulfill everyone else's concerns and needs before mine were attended to. And that was part of my story for a very, very long time. A very long time, I was in that zone of, hey, screw self care. What do I need to others care? I was very much driven by how do I attend to the needs of others outside of me and not really be concerned about what it was that I personally needed in my progression of where I was going in life. True story. That's where I was. For his self care, all he shares, he goes fishing all the time. I love that. Is a fantastic expression of self care. Self care takes many different forms, and I think it has something to do, if I were to define it, has something to do with how you particularly and uniquely find your form of rejuvenating and bringing energy back to yourself. What is that activity that you indulge in whereby you say, when I do this, I feel like it fills me up again. I feel like it replenishes the energy that was gone before. I feel like it brings more space again for awareness in my life and how to attend to moving forward in a really good and helpful way. So that's a really important component as well when we think about what self-care is what is self-care. Sorry, just an itchy nose here this morning. But nonetheless, self care, one of those things that was not on my radar for such a long time. And now it is very much on my radar, even though I'm going to share with you guys that I'm not sure I'm still knocking it out of the park with relation to self care yet. It's one of those areas that I am continuing to fumble my way forward in. I would say that self care is one of those things that is probably my biggest struggle right now, still, as I continue to pursue getting better in my expression of who I am today. And yeah, so that's something that's I'm resonating with, and I chose this question today because I need to have a good answer for myself. I think I have some ideas that are percolating, but I'll share those with you. Excuse me. By the way, when I yawn, I'm not yawning particularly because I'm tired necessarily. I'm yawning because I love it. Well, actually, my body needs to yawn, of course, but I love yawning. I look for opportunities to yawn, and believe it or not, I actually give a number. I assign a number out of from 1 to 10, 10 being fulfilling and satisfying, and one being like, oh, wasn't worth my time. I assign a number to rate my yawns. And so that one there was probably, oh, here's another coming. That was better. So this one is probably an 8. The previous one was probably a solid 6.5. So I enjoy rating my yawns because, yeah, I'm unique that way. So yes, I am still here with you guys present. So self care, one, it's important. Favorite form of self care is the second part of the question. What's your go to form of self care? What's your favorite one? And this is, of course, presuming that you have an awareness well enough of yourself of a variety of ways of self care. And I think that kind of goes without saying that we have various things that we enjoy that replenish and give back to us in a really helpful way. But what are those? And which one of all those is your favorite? What is your favorite form? There we go again. I love yawning. Just again, so you know, I'm not bored with your guys' company. It's so unfortunate that yawning culturally is a sign of I'm bored, I'm checking out. That is anything but for me. So I have to keep on redefining what yawns are for me so that you don't feel like, he's fading on us. Not at all. I had a fantastic rest last night. So, favorite form of self care of the varieties of forms of self care. I'm not sure if you guys would disagree with me, but I think one of the ways of maybe helping to understand what self care is, if you're still struggling with what self care looks like, is what are your hobbies? What are the things you enjoy doing that bring you enthusiastic enjoyment in the midst of it, and also rest along the way? That is something that I consider a really helpful part of what self care could be. And why do you enjoy it so much? So these couple of questions today have so much to do with considering how well do we know ourselves? How well are we aware of what makes us us? What makes us us in the unique expression that is us? How do we go forward in understanding our usness, our unique Mm, I amness. Coming up with some different ways of describing what I'm trying to aim for here so that we can actually make some good decisions when we do make the time or make the space to be able to experience this zone of, hey, this is what really feeds or satisfies or satiates this part of me that helps me get to a point of feeling like I've looked after myself well enough. Self care is also one of those things that I would say doesn't get initiated externally. It should actually start internally, and hence why it's called self care. It's not others caring for usness, but it's self care. When I think of other care, the way I once used to experience it, it was more in the codependence way where I decidedly chose to look after others at the expense of myself. Now, however, I'm more in the zone of saying, hey, what does self care look like when I'm looking after myself? It's you taking the initiative to say, hey, I need some time to look after me. I need to drop off the radar for a bit. I need to be unavailable in whatever context that looks like so that I can tend to me. What does that expression of self care for you look like? Well, let me tell you a little bit more about myself. And how I've struggled my way to where I'm presently at. I was mentioning that I used to be a people pleaser. I used to really nail that out of the park. I used to go out of my way to make sure that I was tending to others at the expense of myself. And this I did on purpose because that's where I felt I needed to express um, extending myself so that I could find acceptance with others. However, now, I would say that I finally moved on to a different expression of tending to me, whereby I am a lot more intentional now of saying, hey, what does it look like for me to look after me before I look after others? And to have that sequential progression because I've come to realize that I'm more limited in extending myself to others if I don't first and foremost look after myself. Another way of putting this is before I put your air mask on in the plane that's going down, I need to put mine on first to make sure I survive long enough to be able to tend to you. Important distinction. And I love that analogy there that is often repeated on airline flights by the flight stewards. And the other component besides trying to please others is I also am working on an expression of me that tends to extend itself beyond what I'm able to do, energy wise. Another way of saying it is I'm a workaholic. I work so much that, yeah, and working so much as much as I do, I failed to implement balance in my life. Balance that says, hey, here's how much I'm going to work, but here's when I'm going to say end of work. I'm now going to move on to the rest time. And I still struggle with that because I'm very opportunistic, I'm very ambitious, and I have lots of energy. So for the longest time, I've acknowledged saying, I've got so much energy and I was able to accomplish some amazing feats that others would be like, that is crazy how you're able to like take all that work and squeeze it and accomplish it. And yeah, it was something even as I look back that I'm still in awe of saying, I can't believe I was able to do that. And yet, in my ability to overextend myself work wise, as I overextended myself work wise, I would say that how can I say this? I wasn't doing self care. I was, in essence, like pushing my limits just because I could. I would push myself so far to points of exhaustion, and I wouldn't think anything was wrong with it. So just like I was giving the analogy earlier of it's like a checkup on ourselves, this self-care business is checking into our well-being, like checking the oil in your engine. If you don't check the oil in your engine and if you go down, your engine is gonna fall apart in ways that is irreparable. And and that's a devastating place to be when your engine falls apart because it didn't get the care that it needs. Because now you're out an engine, and engines are super expensive. I know I had one replaced on my car, thankfully at the dealership's expense, but still, it's a painful thing to watch that evolution happening. It's one of those things you don't want to see happening, and so. What does it look like to look after yourself so you don't break apart in ways that you can't put back together very well? I watched last night this this TikTok video. It was a really sweet, long 3 minute version of a TikTok video. It was, I think, the wife who posted this video, but she posted a video of she and her husband. They've been together for over 2 decades. For 2 decades, they've raised two boys. It was really beautiful. He was athletic, she was gorgeous, but in a moment that all changed when he was in a motorcycle accident. In a motorcycle accident, in the motorcycle accident, he sustained some significant damage to his body, including brain injury. And it took him a few years to recover. And that was a very slow recovery process for him. And through it all, she stuck right by his side. She had a little cup right by his bed in the hospital room there. And it showed the progression. And I mean, going through those moments, I can't help but imagine how difficult it is to be able to see someone you love with no assurance that it's actually going to work out. You're just waiting on the edge of your seat every day to see how the progression goes or the regression, because there's those as well, I'm certain, in the process of one's recovering from something as significant as a motorcycle accident. And let me tell you, he did not look like he once was. But seeing that progression over time, I mean, I was just kind of watching and saying, holy crap, how is this going to end up? And it's a beautiful thing to see the end result of him being able to walk independently, but he was very slow again, and he wasn't the same person he was before. So, that analogy that I'm sharing with you is for the reason of saying that's what it was like when I did not attend to self care and I gave more space for self harm, for self abuse, as I pushed my body, as I extended myself to some places that I really shouldn't have been at that level. I was just pushing myself as hard as I could, just because I could, and just because I was able to do a lot more than most people can do. That's where I found myself. Acceptance in the acceptance of others first. It was externally driven, and so a terrible place to find it. And that's one of those areas I still struggle with today. So let me get to my answer now on the question of what is your favorite self care activity and why do you enjoy it so much? Again, to accomplish this question here, I had to consider all the ways that I enjoy for self care. And there's a variety of ways that I enjoy self care. There's a variety of ways that I also could be applying more of it to myself. Some forms of self care for me. I love driving out to the mountain. Oh, that's amazing. Amazing experience to be driving out into the midst of the mountains and reminding myself experientially of how small I am as I stand or drive through the foot of these mountains, looking at this grandiosity around me and saying, wow, like how small am I? And as I'm right in the midst of the mountains and this amazing greatness around me, the thought that's usually going through my mind is, the very things that I was worried about or concerned about don't seem to be as big of a deal anymore. They don't seem to be as big of a concern anymore because wow, like this is just overwhelmingly that's the level of engagement that I'm usually experiencing in the midst of mountains. So that's one thing I enjoy doing. I enjoy reading. I love reading and taking time off for reading, and that fills me as well. That takes time, though, however, for me to sit down and focus on what I'm reading and benefit from it. So I enjoy that process. That's something else I tremendously benefit from, but I don't make time from. That I also really enjoy is going for walks. Going for walks either by myself or with friends. That also feeds my soul as well, and I really enjoy that component. Now, which of these few things that I enjoy doing that feeds my soul would I say is my favorite? I would say it's the last one. Going for walks is my favorite form of self care, and I will tell you why. Now, as I'm telling you that it's going for walks, I mentioned earlier that doing self care for me is one of the challenging things that I still struggle to implement. I don't do this very well. In my own personal context, I struggle with this. I struggle with it in a very significant way because I'm thinking more in terms of, oh, I can't take time off for myself. I need to get X, Y, and Z done. And there I'm being driven by external factors instead of saying, but how do I look after myself? And so that's one area that I still keep fumbling on. And I've started implementing some action on what does taking self-care look like for me. Last week, for example, I took a walk. I started off with a walk, and I took you guys along for that walk too. I went on the hello Petierne, um, and Sebastian, I see you. I went for a walk, and it was glorious. And during that walk, I also brought you guys along. To do a live stream because it had been a while. So that's something else I incorporated in the midst of that. And so that was such a blast for me to enjoy it. This time of year here is gorgeous, gorgeous in a couple of significant ways. One, the weather is like the perfect range, like from 18 degrees Celsius to like 25 degrees Celsius. Really happy zone. Hello, Zaina. And in that zone there, I find I am so in my zone. This is like why can't it be this weather like year round? And unfortunately, here in Calgary, as much as I love this place, this season, this fall season where this weather is just perfect right now, it's very short. It's probably like a month and a half at most before it's over, and it's like moving into the chilly season. And so that makes me sad because I love this time. And when it's colder, it's a lot harder to be out there enjoying it. Although there's lots of sunshine, and I'm going to look for creative ways to still be available to do these live streams and to also take time out for myself. But that's one of the areas that I'm working on continually is how do I take time out for me that way? That's very important. Mm, very important. And then also, I would say another expression for me of why this is important is because it reminds me to take life a little slower. This is the best time of year. I agree, says Tierney. Awesome. I would have said that spring was my favorite time because everything's coming to life again. My birthday may be in the midst of spring. Some compelling things like that. But fall definitely beats spring for me right now, just because it is that ideal temperature. But in addition to the temperature being so temperate and fantastic in the way that I really enjoy it, a second component that I really appreciate about this form of self care and going out for walks more often is because it reminds me to take life a little slower. So I don't know if you're like me, but when I'm driving, usually, which I was driving plenty of times as an Uber driver, the premise was to get from point A to point B in as short a time span as possible. And I was pretty good at doing that. I knew the shortcut ways, ways to avoid traffic, that kind of thing. You learn those kind of things over time. Hello, Khaled. How are you, my friend? Nice to see you. And so, yes, that was really good time wise, efficiency wise. I know a long time, my friend. I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. Yes, so along those lines, I would say that why I enjoy walking over driving. And I was asked this question last night when I was on a walk with you guys on the live stream. And one of my followers was asking, saying, why don't you just drive to the park that you're walking to? Why do you walk? And for me, the reason I'm taking the time out to walk and enjoy that moment and that experience is because just like going to the mountains reminds me of how small I am, and by how small I am physically, also how small my problems are in life. It gives me a contrast there. Going for walks instead of driving also gives me that same sense of awareness of what's important. It makes me realize that life can also go in the slow lane, whereby I can give myself space and time to think, space and time to look around me and see life in the slow lane, not just driving. When you're driving, it's a whole different experience, right? You're just seeing things go by pretty fast. But when you're walking, you have more time to look around you. You have more time to notice things you didn't notice when you're driving by the same road, for example. And so that's a really important expression for me. Thank you for the finger hearts, my dear Khaled. It's an important expression for me to savor that experience of life isn't made to go by super fast, like right now, kind of thing. There are times when we should just kind of slow down and enjoy something. One of my favorite ways of reflecting on this is, for example, am when I am eating food. I love eating food. I love food and I enjoy savoring food, but if I'm with company, I usually don't get a chance to do that because I'm doing a lot more talking than eating. But imagine me sitting down to eat, say, a cheesecake. I'm like, hey, I already like cheesecake. And so I'm just about to dig into this cheesecake and eat it like I normally would. You know, I have a certain amount of time before I'll expect this cheesecake to be done because I enjoy that process. But after the first mouthful goes in my mouth, all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, this is unlike every other cheesecake experience I've had. Yes, I enjoy cheesecake, but there's something distinctly different about this cheesecake. This cheesecake is actually a work of art in its taste. It's rich, it is thick, it is wow. I'm gonna need to take my time on this one, not because I have to, but because I want to. It would be a crime for me to just chow down like I normally would every other cheesecake with this one here. So I slow down and I start eating small pieces by small piece because now I'm like, I want to really enjoy this experience. I want to savor it for as long as I can. And so I take that experience and I stretch it out because I want to enjoy this process a little bit more than I thought I would have. That is what going for walks for me is like, is how can I enjoy this experience a little longer? How can I stretch out this existence in the space and time that I'm taking right now, walking down the street instead of driving down, and enjoy all the things around me, from the sky to the weather to the people that I get to walk by and acknowledge in their existence walking by me, to the leaves that are changing color this time of year, to like just so many experiences that I get to enjoy along the way. And that's something worthwhile reflecting, savoring, and enjoying in my process. And so that's my form of self-care and why I enjoy what I enjoy in my walks. Kyle says, driving with no other cars brings a peace of mind. You see your city in another. Oh, so true, Khaled. I'm not sure if it's the same for you, but in my city here, the best time to do that is like I'd probably suggest like 3:30 to 5:30 range in the morning when everyone's still down for the most part sleeping. That's when most of our streets are empty, and so beautiful time. Yeah, that is another experience to enjoy, to be certain. Friends, that is some of the reflections that I wanted to share with you this morning in my process for self care. Like I said, it's not something that I nail out of the park doing very well. I need to work hard at this because taking time out like this, it's a big deal. It's a big deal for all of us, I would say. It's a way of acknowledging our humanity, that we are in need on a continual basis of caring for ourselves. When we get hungry, we of course exercise self-care by feeding ourselves. When we're tired, we go and have a rest, sleep-wise, because we need it. We can't get by without it, right? So these are some of the basic components: drinking when you're thirsty, all those things that you need to survive. But it goes a little further to say, hey, what does self-care look like over and above these necessities, to also care for your mind, to care for your heart, to care for your emotional well-being? How do you apply that kind of self-care? What do you do to make space to recalibrate that way? Hey, Benyam says, Tate, I can't stay for long. Just started a new job today. Gotta go soon, but have a great day. You too, my friend Tate. Thank you for being here. Khaled says self-care is very important, helps keep one sane. So true, Khaled. My dear friends, perhaps you are in that zone or season of life where you're trying to figure out what self care looks like. Maybe it's that you have actually not experienced it for such a long time and it's overdue, and you could use some help in getting to that point. Perhaps you're already on the other end where you're feeling depleted, where you have no more to give, and it continues to drive you into the ground because you're like, what you're talking about sounds really amazing, but it's inaccessible to me. I don't even know how to get myself there. Or maybe you just don't see how you can understand yourself or become aware of yourself well enough to know what it is that is going to serve you this way. If you're in that zone of struggle of wondering what does self-care look like and how can I get back into experiencing it in a tangible way, my dear friend, I would love to hear from you. On my website, bennymasters.com, for a limited time, for just so many spots that I have available, there's a 30% discount on my services where I can come alongside and help you get aware of yourself and how you can get to this season and experience this in your life. Let me tell, and it's, yes, I definitely agree with you, Cal. It's different for everyone, for sure. So if you would like that help, hit me up today. BennyMasters.com. I hope to see you guys tomorrow on another episode of the Checkin In podcast. Talk to you soon. Bye for now.